So Damon is a good friend. Damon is a Wim Hof Method Instructor. We both live with a diagnosis of a brain tumour, and we both have had interesting experiences in our lifestyle changes. Damon has had some excellent experiences and positive outcomes as a result of becoming Wim Hof Method Instructor.
When Lynn was talking just now, one of the difficulties I think we have when we have pain is that we've got a subconscious brain that's going away in the background, and it's sort of constant kind of dialogue. And we need to break that cycle sometimes. So as an example, I had surgery and a lot going on in the head quite a few years ago. I now wake up most mornings with a bit of a tight head. Now, sometimes I sit there and think, have I got a tight head? Is there pain there? And then when I actually do that, it goes away. But I think subconsciously I'm giving it energy all the time because I'm used to it. And so my challenge is, how do I now break the habit of that? And sometimes we need a big shock to the system, like jumping into an ice bath. That shock. And other times to support that, maybe we need the ongoing process of me lying there at night or in the morning just thinking to myself, I'm going to relax my jaw. I'm probably tensing my whole head all day. And actually just start to listen to my body and just try and relax as much as I can, and also understand that my thoughts and feelings are feeding, that phrase where your thoughts go, your energy flows. And if I think I've got a headache all the time, I'm probably going to have a headache all the time. But how can I break that cycle? So if I look at the kind of the Wim Hof background and also the lives we live at the moment, when Lynn was talking, what really struck me was it's a classic example of where we all are. We live in this world where we were designed to have a physical stress response to a physical stressor, the saber-toothed tiger. We now live in a world where we have we're psychological world, emotional or mental stresses. It's not fear of a dog coming to eat me. It's fear of your boss, your wife, your cousin, your whoever it is. And we're not really burning off that energy, but we are in fight or flight. And if we're in it constantly, then our body always is trying to bring us back to homeostasis. But if it's in fight or flight, then it's not doing that. And inflammation builds up. We're not getting rid of the toxins. And also we're breaking down our body's tissues to give us that energy and give us some glucose and everything to run away from the danger. And it's like being on high alert. It's bloody stressful. It's tiring. The analytical brain's kicking in. And for me, the way I make that relative is, I look at 2 or 3 years ago, I had a moment where I went from complete fear. I've got this diagnosis, so this will naturally lead to a fear of this is going to happen to me at some point down the road, to not being in fear. So I went from thinking I'm 40, I've got a brain tumor diagnosis, it's grown back, I'm going to die soon. So then 6 weeks later, nothing had changed, but everything had changed because I now thought, we're powerful. This is exciting.
There's a bit, I think, which is quite interesting. If you've got fear that's primitive, primeval, need, as in a dog, that's not the same as saying having a fear of, because that fear of something is often a mind-related activity.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's a fear, it is literally an instinctive, get out. What is it that you experience, therefore, when you go into that ice bath? Is it the cold? Can you feel a sense of what it is that shuts down your mind?
The cold is good because I can get into a meditative state, but the real one for me is when I start doing the breath work and then I hold my breath and go into this quiet state. That's the only time in the day when my brain switches off completely and I'm there thinking, oh, I've just got 2 or 3 minutes of quiet here and nothing's going on. The amount of people I know who come along to my workshops who have ADHD of varying kind of levels and autism, who said my mind is just blah, 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 blah. And then they do the breath work or they get into an ice bath and they look at me and went, well, I don't have any thoughts. And this is good.
What I think Damon is pointed out, and Lynn also has connected up to, is it is about a technique that is helping you to quieten the mind.
Yeah, when you jump into the ice, obviously you get your stress response triggered, but ultimately there's only one thing to do. Your body's thinking, how do I get out of this?
What Wim Hof also teaches in relation to stress is going to it. When you go to the stressor, you are the person in control.
Yeah, we now have to consciously choose stress, and it's what the scientists call hormetic stress, which is low dose intermittent acute stress, which is actually good for us because 2-minute ice bath kicks in your adaptive immune system, and your adaptive immune system starts to help. The hormetic stress is essentially what the scientists call slowing down of the aging process. I did a fast recently, actually, a 72-hour fast. And the reason I did it was because I was listening to Dr. Mindy Peltz on the Diary of the CEO. She said, after 72 hours, that's when we can see that we've measured that stem cells start being created, and they go anywhere in the body and heal all sorts of stuff. And I thought, oh, I could do with a bit of that. So I tried a 72-hour fast, and I was saying to Dan, because I think Dan recently did one as well. And I also felt really high on the final day. I said to Dan, I put on some music in the car, and the music was coming through me. I couldn't stop smiling and bouncing. And so after 72 hours, something happens to you. Your body resets, and you kick into the other systems. As Sue was saying, you're into your ketogenic, and it's amazing what happens.
What you're talking about, I think, connects into part of the metabolic aspect, which is you have anabolic and catabolic metabolism, two processes. And having watched the film about fasting, The Healer Within, anabolic is obviously the one that we all hear about because of anabolic steroids, etc., is a building up process. But catabolic is that breaking down process. And that's the thing that we don't do enough of. And fasting is that process that supports that catabolic process because it stimulates the need for the stem cells.
So a little bit of acute stress on a daily basis is good for us. And Wim does an experiment where he's put in his hot and cold suit, like a fireman's suit, where they flush in hot and cold water. And then he's just doing his breathing and kind of focusing his mind. And when they kind of crack open his brain in an MRI, they see that the insula is going down, but the periaqueductal area, which is responsible for pain reception, and is just spiking in activity. So loads of endocannabinoids and cannabinoids are being released. But the bit that they don't quite know, and they call it the brain over body study, is because it's, well, what's actually coming first? Is it Wim's actual kind of desire and intention to kind of, I'm going to focus and release these endocannabinoids, whether he actually thinks that, or is it actually the breath work and the body's response? So what comes first in the end, which is like chicken and the egg? Well, either way, it's pretty powerful. We can either consciously choose to engage our bodies and physically or physiology to kind of help release endocannabinoids, or we can consciously just think about it.
I'm so interested in the Wim Hof program as a method of that mixture, exactly as you say, of sort of over breathing, so stimulating the sympathetic nervous system response, how it impacts the brain, because it's like no other physiological process, as you know, in that it involves the whole brain. So we have 3 different major centers in the brain that are to do with breathing, but it's connected all over the brain. And the Wim Hof program, I think, is so interesting because it combines different types of breathing patterns. So it's involving different parts of the brain.
It's also the chemistry that's going on with that breathing.
It's the breath work for me that actually helps me reconnect with, get away from the thoughts, back into.
And that connects with Swami Rama, who was around in the 1970s, who did experiments like Wim Hof did on the autonomic nervous system, who used breath in a meditative way. And given that your breath is your vital force, if you focus your attention on breath and you control your breath, there is a spirit taking hold of that breath. That comes back to Graham's work on the spirit of self.
The beauty of the Wim Hof method is we do deep breathing, which stimulates the sympathetic stress response, and then you do the slow breathing, which takes you out of it. And the way we breathe dictates how we feel and emotionally what's kind of, and physically and physiologically what's going on, either in fight or flight. It's giving your body the signal to say, prepare for danger, or you can relax. And
Actually, when you look at free diving, they actually slow their breathing down to the point of they can stay, because they go a bit deeper.
yeah,
And actually in that, I think by slowing their body down and they're putting their organs so there's not as much stress on their organs, they're actually able to respond not only to staying in the water longer, but also if they did need to act in fight or flight to suddenly get themselves out of there, they're actually more equipped at that point because they've slowed everything down to deal with it.
and they've conserved a load of energy.
Yes.
That's what when Neil mentioned Swami Rama, and that's what Wim Hof does to a certain extent. He brings his kind of slows his breathing right down to can actually get to the point where you really slow your heart rate down, and then you're using less energy, and you seem to flip into a different kind of part of the brain. The Wim Hof breathing technique actually came from, it's called tumour, inner fire. When we get deep into our kind of following the breath, that's when you start to relax the mind as well. And a lot of emotions can come up in the Wim Hof breathwork because we're trying to hold on to stuff every day, like holding on to this thing that happened. We don't know we're doing it, but we're physically and mentally tensing. And then when the mind kind of becomes a bit freer through breathwork, just lets go of all the stuff that's been kept in there since.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when Greg was really bad when he was younger, and he was having really bad seizures, and it was really, difficult times. And around that, over those years, I think I kind of, because I was a nursing before, I think I took on nurse mode. So that was how I controlled it, coped. And then I remember going for a massage. We went off with friends and I had a massage, and I just completely lost it completely. And I couldn't even know why. I didn't feel like I was, stressed, but it just all came out, and absolutely felt exhausted after it as well. And I think that was what it was. It was trying to hold it all in all that time. You don't even realize you are. Yeah.
We are so good at that, aren't we? We're holding on to stuff and just keep on going. And we can do it. We're strong, but we can actually give ourselves a break.
I'm quite keen to hear from James. James went over to America to meet Dr. Joe Dispenza.
With Joe's work, it's so powerful, it's so accessible. He teaches it in such a way whereby there's no doubt left, albeit I have had periods of doubt where I've doubted, because I came into Joe's work with what I've been through. I came into Joe's work doubting heavily. I was diagnosed with a grade 4 diffused midline glioma. I forget about it.
This is the point that Joe makes on the video. It's powerful. He forgets the diagnosis is because you don't identify with it. It's not your identity.
No, I put my energy where my attention is, and I put my attention on health and successful scans and positive things rather than negativity, whatever it is. So I was diagnosed, and I, through a beautiful charity, got prescribed to do intravenous vitamin C. And the doctor there, a medical doctor, she recommended Joe's work based on her friend. Her friend had a stroke and lost vision in her lateral peripherals of both eyes. If you split an eye into quarters, like the bottom right of each eye. And in one meditation on Brighton Beach a few years ago now, I think it was, she had a walking meditation, which Joe teaches, as well as sat down meditations and seated. And in one meditation, she had a felt sense of a piece of paper being scrunched up in her head and pulled out, which to her was quite odd, obviously. And then she came round at the end of the meditation, opened her eyes and had full vision again, all proven in scans. And Joe uses that as actually an example quite a lot, because she was also being tested during that meditation. She had an quantitative EEG mask on. and it backed up everything she was saying, and she had scans that showed her vision was fully back. But I mean, that's one of many, many, many testimonials showing how potent and powerful his work is. And it's all based in science. It's all scientifically backed. It's no woo-woo stuff, which was key for me to get on board. Like we said earlier, you do need to believe it to achieve it.
2 or 3 years ago, when I had my moment, it wasn't the actual physiological effects of the breath work or the cold. It was my suddenly belief and trust in my body is going to go, Wim's told me I'm powerful. And I just started believing it. And that sent all the different messages to my brain and body, and from my brain to my body to do whatever it did.
Building up trust in your own inner voice.
It's important to point out that Dr. Joe Dispenza has been around for many, many years, and that he's been documenting his work in scientific studies, and he's got to a point now where the scientists, neuroscientists and doctors can't deny the work. They can't say it's woo-woo. They can't say because the evidence is there. It's using proper equipment. So there is something going on. And that something is within the person. It doesn't necessarily come down to the technique. If you don't have the right beliefs or the right chemistry or everything around it, whether it works is questionable then.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily come down to the technique, it's the person.
Your belief system is telling your body what to do every moment.
That's the common denominator. It's the person that makes all the difference.
I think it's so interesting hearing everyone's story and what their different methods of escaping health problems. It really stands to show how powerful we all are and how we can be the creators of our life and not the victims. And it's just so powerful. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Okay.
Been absolutely brilliant.